thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
This is truly a pleasure because I know you for more than 10 years now, 11 years now. It's been 11 years since we've met, but I know that your history in Japan is a long one.
Very long, Lance.
Very long.
Even longer than yours.
Very long. It is most definitely. So please, Tony, tell me a little bit about your past. I mean, where'd you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born here in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows St. Luke's Hospital. So in 1957.
Okay.
Yeah, back then, I was born, my father was in the Air Force, and of course my mother was Japanese. St. Luke's was the Air Force or the military hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, there was no base hospital then?
No, that was the base hospital.
Oh, St. Luke's.
So St. Luke's was.
Which base? What base?
Well, my dad was stationed at Haneda.
That's right.
Haneda Air Base.
Yes.
So my family lived, and my mother was in Omori.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's where they were there, and that's where I lived, I think, until I left when I was about a year old.
To go where?
To go to U.S. So my father got transferred.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up going to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
And of course, it was my mom's first time ever, and then stayed there that's where my sister was born too.
Okay. So you have one sibling?
I have one sibling, and she was born in the U.S.
How many years difference?
3 years.
Okay. You guys close?
Well, yeah, we talk all the time. But
Is she here in Japan now?
No, she's in Australia. She's been in Australia for the last 30-something years.
Mm-hmm. Did she make you an uncle?
She's actually, I'm a great uncle. Because she has grandchildren too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, my mom, who's still alive, is, a great grandmother.
Great grandmother.
Yeah, so.
Because of your sister?
Because of my sister.
Okay.
Not because of me.
Right. You don't have children?
I do. I have a daughter. She's 34.
34, okay.
Yeah, but I don't think she's planning on having any kids. So
Right.
At least not now. So.
Okay. All right. So you went to the States. How long did you live in the States?
No, we only lived there for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much just enough to get my citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was born, I didn't have any citizenship. Because my
you
father,
left right away?
Well, my father was in the Air Force. Mother was Japanese, she was American. Back then, there was a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a non-citizen,
mm-hmm.
or whatever, citizen of the planet until I went to the U.S. I was about 2 years old, I think, when I was naturalized.
And that was, so you became an American first?
Became an American.
Are you still, did you ever become Japanese?
I'm on the Koseki because of my mother, but that's
Okay.
about it.
That's about it.
Yeah, I never carried a Japanese passport
Mm-hmm.
or anything. Always been a U.S. passport.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So your schooling, where'd you go to school?
So I started off in kindergarten. I actually went to Tachikawa Kindergarten in the Air Base.
I came here, I have to put this in. My orders were, when I first came to Japan, was to Tachikawa. When I got over here, they realized that the base was being closed down and there were no barracks for men. They only had the WAF's barracks.
No, okay.
And they had the hospital
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
WAF barracks, that was it.
Yeah.
So they had to recut my orders. So I had a month to travel around Japan
That's cool.
and do
That's
whatever
cool.
I want
Yeah.
on the government's dime.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really
So
nice.
so I went to, when I was, we came back when I was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up living in a place called Kunitechi, which is
Next door.
Next door to Tachikawa. Mm-hmm. My dad got stationed at Tachikawa, and I went to school. Went to a Japanese kindergarten, and then went to the U.S. kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And at that kindergarten, even back then, even the military kindergartens they were run by nuns.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And at that time, the nun recommended that I come to St. Mary's.
And that's where you went straight out of kindergarten?
To St. Mary's for first grade.
Okay,
Yeah.
first grade.
For first grade. And then at that time, though, military pretty much was the primary school kids at St.
That was
Mary's.
for all the international schools, actually.
Yeah, ASIJ too.
ASIJ
Was started
as
as
well,
a
Because Chofu was right there and right in front of ASIJ. ASIJ was
Yeah.
right behind.
But when I started first grade, ASIJ was still at Meguro.
Where they left the nursery kindergarten.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so they were still in Meguro. When I was in like second or third grade is when
Mm-hmm.
they moved over to the
Mm-hmm.
Chofu campus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I came, of course, being Italian Catholic,
Okay. Right.
I had to come to a Catholic all-boys school.
Okay.
So I went there, and at that time, I'd probably say it must have been at least over 100 kids, military, all bust in to the school from the various bases. I think from Yokota there's probably 90 just from that area. Yokota, Tachikawa, Chofu, all those, because there were so many bases back
That's
then.
right, they sure did. There's base to base to base to base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a military brat.
Okay.
Yeah, so, per se. So
you were on the base a lot? Well, of course,
Well,
what am I talking about? Your father was still in the service.
he was still in service.
Did he retire?
He retired in 1964.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, my dad was in World War II, then Korean War, and then parts of the Vietnam in the beginning.
Just the beginning, yes,
the
to set it up.
what they call it, the expeditionary force or something like that they were called back then. Yeah, so he was part of that.
What was his job in the Air Force?
Well, he started off, my dad is a former Golden Gloves boxer. And so when he knew he was getting drafted, he enlisted in the Air Force. And then they sent him to special services. So because of his boxing and athletics, so he ended up the war years in special services. And then he cross-trained to become a navigator, pretty much. So then he was a flight engineer, I guess that's is what they call him back nowadays, but that's what he did. And then he was flying ever since. So from the time I was born, he was always flying. When my sister was born, he wasn't even around. He was across on the other side of the world, yeah.
So what was your relationship like with your father?
Well, like I said, I didn't, in my beginning years, I didn't even speak English.
Okay. And he spoke no Japanese?
He spoke zero Japanese.
Okay.
My mom spoke zero English. I ended up, of course, being raised by my mom and my grandparents who lived with us at that time. They all spoke Japanese. So when I went to school in the first grade, English was my worst subject because, it took a while to learn to speak English. So, Japanese was my first language at that time.
But St. Mary's allowed you to keep it up, didn't they?
Yeah, of course, they at that time they helped you.
And they made sure you continue to keep your Japanese reading and writing.
Priority at St. Mary's was always English.
Right.
Yeah, and then later on, a lot of stress on French because it is a French-Canadian school. Yeah, so from when I was in 4th grade is when they start teaching French.
So you speak French as well?
Oh yeah, perfectly right. When you're taught that, when you're told to learn French, it's like Latin.
That's right.
Okay.
You have to, right?
Yeah, it's a Catholic school, so Latin is required. Yeah, I was like, what for?
Right.
But you know what? It's great. Then you learn about the roots
of
the
way you think,
things, and you see some things, and because you know Latin, it's in a different language. You can kind of, French, Italian, all that has some mixtures in it, and you can kind of understand the roots of where it comes from. So it is an interesting, afterwards it's pretty interesting. So if I was going to be a priest, that would have been perfect.
It'd been perfect. It would have helped you, especially when you're doing prayers in French. What happened after high school, after you finished your high school at St. Mary's? Where'd you go from there?
So after high school, I ended up, what happened was, oil shock in 1974. So my dad worked as a military, and then he worked on the base as a civilian. And then he went to work for an electronics company out of Canada. It was in Shibuya. And
so he stayed in Japan?
Yeah, he stayed in Japan the whole time. And then the oil shock hit. Right. And all the companies.
That was in the 70s?
It was 74, yeah.
Right.
So around 74. So all the companies left. So I ended up pretty much. So what happened was after I graduated, I stayed back for about half a year. I worked, part-time.
Would you graduate?
Like 1975.
75, because I came here in 74.
Yeah. So I graduated in 75, and then stayed here for a little bit, then went back to the U.S., went to school there. And
but you hadn't been there since you were a little kid, or did you go back and forth every now and then?
Never.
Okay, so
I had not been to the U.S. since I was 3 years old.
Okay, right. So that was your first time going there after that time.
Yeah, it was.
And did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to school there in California, in Los Angeles, and then, when I got there, it was, L.A. is supposed to be a big city. Coming from Tokyo, it was like,
out in the country.
Yeah, it was like laid
out. So spread out, right.
Where which is you're from? So I kind of
right.
understand. I'm used to Shinjuku.
Right, of course. And you said downtown. This is what you guys call a city?
Yeah. So, right. but it was, of course, it's huge. It's sprawled all over. But yeah, it was a culture shock. In the beginning, but it was kind of a good type of culture shock. You know, I'm looking at, and all I've seen was, you know, black hair with women and stuff. And the first time I see all these blonde hair ladies.
Right.
So that was a culture shock there. So, wow. But no, I stayed there and then went back and forth. You know, every summer come back, things like that.
Would you study? What were your goals? I mean, growing up, did you ever think that you'd follow your father's footsteps and go into the Air Force?
Never. My dad, of course, wanted that.
He did want that.
Oh yeah, he's big time.
Your father's passed.
He passed away about 37 years ago. But when I turned 18, he grabbed me and said, "We're going to go register for the draft."
And did you?
And yeah, he took me over to the registration office, and then they told him, "Oh, the draft is not done. You don't have to register."
That's right, because after
about 6 months before I turned 18. So that was one good thing, you know. So I didn't join, and I went back. But I've always wanted to be a baseball player. So.
Is it you were really good in baseball?
Yeah, baseball was my main thing.
And you were good.
Yeah, I mean, baseball I played since I was 6 years old. That was my main sport. For some time in high school, I ended up wrestling.
Okay.
Right.
How long did you do that? Because St. Mary's had a very good wrestling team.
I wrestled for 3 years in St. Mary's,
okay.
and then I was the captain final year. But you know, ranked #1. But then, you know how things go. It don't work out all the time. So, anyways, but
baseball, what position did you enjoy?
I was a shortstop.
Shortstop.
Yeah.
You enjoyed that. Okay.
So, but that was my main thing. So, you know, I really wanted to go to Arizona State College because my hero was from there. You know, Reggie Jackson.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and actually I got accepted there, but because of the oil shock and all that kind of stuff, and being out of residence and stuff like that, yeah, I didn't end up going there. I ended up going to California because my uncle lived there. Okay. And I was able to stay with him and go to school.
This is your father's brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he happened to be there, so I stayed with him for a while. And then I came back, and then I stayed with my other uncle for a while, you know. And
wait, your other uncle in Japan?
No, it's in California. So I had 2 uncles in California.
Okay. So your father had two brothers?
Yeah.
There were 3 of him, and just 3 of them in his family?
No, there's 6 boys, 7 boys altogether. One girl, but one passed away during the war.
Okay, was your father the oldest?
No, my father was in the middle, smack right in the middle. So the family my dad's side comes from Sicily. So in a small town called Musumeli in Sicily. And my grandfather were born there. And my 2 oldest uncles, one that passed away in the war, and then the other one also were born in Sicily. And they immigrated to.
Have you ever been to Sicily?
Never.
Have you been to Italy at all?
Never.
You're afraid someone might recognize you?
Yeah, probably. I've been like to England and there, but never down that far. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so you know, then they lived in Buffalo, New York, of all the places, right?
Tell me about it.
And no wonder they moved out to California. You know, the rest of them, I think, now are living in Florida.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, but I still have a lot of relatives in Buffalo. In fact, I just got an email from my cousin, another cousin. It's actually, what do they call it? Your second cousin, or or once removed, or something like that, right? He's actually the president. Just got elected as a president of the Buffalo Club in Buffalo, New York. So it was, and he saw my name when he's going through all the different. So. Because I'm on the Platinum Club board.
Right.
So.
Well, how did you get into the profession you're in now? What did you do prior to getting this profession? What led into?
Well, you know, like I said, I wanted to play baseball.
Right.
Physical education.
Right.
So when I went to college, I did not pick my classes.
You didn't pick your classes?
No, they were all picked for me.
For you, because just stay in the sport. You're right. That's same.
Everything is done for me.
Right.
I came in and here's your classes, here's what you're going, and here's your practice schedule.
Right. Because that's the priority. Just make sure you understand the priority.
And so that was, you know, the pretty much so. And then, but then, you know, I come from a family of restaurateurs. You know, so they my uncle, who was in California, I stayed with, owned a restaurant. I have uncles and cousins in Buffalo who own restaurants, so that kind of had my interest, you know. And then, but then, for some reason, I ended up being offered a job when I was a junior to come back to Japan and actually work for Pacific Stars and Stripes as a contractor.
To do what?
Just a government contractor. We handled everything of Pacific Stars and Stripes other than printing.
Okay.
So distribution, sales, everything was under a contractor. This is when the military wanted to think that outsourcing was the greatest thing. They started outsourcing everything that they possibly can. And so, they were looking for people to come back to Japan. And
so you were over Hardy Barracks, where the Stars and Stripes was?
Actually, yeah, I was at the Yokota Bureau.
Okay.
But the Hardy Barracks was there, and then they had the offices and everything were at Yokota.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up back at Yokota. I know, because after my dad retired from the Air Force, he stayed, went to work for the military at Tachikawa, but then we had to move. We moved right next to Yokota. And when I say right next to Yokota, the fence was right there.
Right there, okay.
Yeah. So we, bought a house back then, and moved there, and that's where I lived all the way through high school. So, and then I ended up back working at Yokota.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how I came back to Japan.
Right.
So it was an opportunity, pretty much they paid for everything. They gave me a pretty good salary and said, yeah, come on back.
Okay.
I said, okay.
So how long did you do that before you changed?
So I did that for about 8 years. I was doing that, and then I was trying to finish up, college overseas. The University of Maryland program.
You did that on base, right?
Yeah, so I went
Night
through there.
classes
Did all those night classes.
Right.
There was no online classes
That's
back
right.
then.
No, back then
You
there
had
sure
to go to.
That's right, evening classes, right?
Yeah, so I was trying to work and go to those and finish that up, and then, and then the Air Force realized that outsourcing may not be the best.
Thing, right.
So they started cutting all the outsourcers. And then I was offered a job to work at Tama Hills as a outdoor recreation director.
Right. You know how the Japanese used to use Tama Hills, don't you? You know what it was?
Back in the World War II? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What was it?
It was an ammo depot. It was a factory.
Because I went in there and all that yellow powder and stuff. Yeah. And when I was in the Air Force, I was a carpenter, but then we had top secret clearance because we had to go in those places and help repair some areas.
Yeah.
And that's when I asked, what's all this yellow dust? They said that was the material they used for the bombs.
Yeah.
And that's the residue left over.
Yeah.
And all those hills that we're golfing over were areas they went under. And did you know about the tunnel from Tachikawa to Yokota?
I'm not sure. I don't know about that tunnel.
They could take a one-ton truck through there.
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, they probably had that. When I was so I went to work at Tama, of course, at that time it was still the old lodge, and it was all the World War II buildings were still there. All the tunnels, underground tunnels that connected, because you're talking about 500, it's about 500 acres total.
I know, that's right.
In that whole area, and it was just covered with tunnels and old World War II buildings. And so I was there I was there originally on site for about 10 years. And then in 1999, or 98, they offered me, 1988, I was only there actually for a couple of years physically. Then they moved me to Yokota because the Air Force started a new program called outdoor recreation.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a brand new program, and they needed somebody, so I went over there and took over and established their outdoor recreation program for them. And stayed there for about 10 years, and then offered another job back to Tama as a consolidated general manager. So that was my first general manager's job. Is when I was about 40 years old. I took over all of Tama Hills as the consolidated general manager.
How long did that last?
And I did that for about 10 years in total. And then halfway through, they decided to throw the golf course into it.
Right.
Yeah, so now I had
the par 3. No, the Tama Hills.
Tama Hills golf course.
Right.
So I learned more about golf than I ever wanted to know about.
Had you ever golfed?
Of course.
Okay.
But not while I'm there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. There's one of the. I mean,
prior to doing that job, had you golfed?
Prior to doing that job, they tried to teach me.
But you were so you weren't a golfer.
I was not a golfer.
All right. You became one after you had that job.
Well, I became a greenskeeper.
Okay.
I learned more about chemicals, than I ever wanted to know about, and what they did and all the effects of that kind of stuff. So, I learned how to run a golf course, and at the same time, I ran the lodge and then the outdoor recreation. So, that gave me the experience on running outdoor camps and stuff like that, and also hotels. So that's my kind of my introduction to hotels.
Right.
Now, food and beverage I had been doing on and off, doing things there, working at my uncle's place while I was doing things. So I had some experience there, but lodging I never had. But that was my first experience working up there in 1988 to help with the lodging. And that got me into the club part, and then also the fun part there.
That was the fun part for you.
Well, the fun part was running probably the most popular club in the Kanto area.
The NCO club?
No, this was the Tama Hills Club.
Oh, the Tama Hills Club, okay.
Yeah, the Tama Hills Club, yeah. It's called Hillcrest Lounge, but it was the Tama Club. The thing was, this is on a military installation, but was open to the public.
Okay.
So on Fridays and Saturdays, it only opened, the club was there, the bar was there, open 7 days a week. However, on Fridays and Saturdays, anybody can come in. The gates were wide open. So any given night, we can have, like on a Friday or Saturday, 600 people, in a place that's like double the size of this room.
Right. That's all. So you're packed.
Yeah.
Standing room only.
Yeah, and more celebrities came there.
Oh, really?
All Japanese celebrities.
Oh, celebrities, okay.
Yeah, were there all the time because it was on base and, it was different. And, beer was like $1. So it was a fun time. That was a learning experience. Great DJ we used to have. Actually, he was from a former retired Green Beret.
Okay.
Yeah. He can tell you all kinds of stories that you don't even want to learn about.
Right.
Yeah. He was one of those. He was one of those guys. Been shot 7 times in Vietnam.
I can show you each place. Right.
But he DJ'd out of New York. Really great guy. Passed away now.
Is that where you learned how to DJ?
That's where I learned how to DJ.
Okay, because you helped me out with that one little thing I tried to do, and I thought I knew what I was doing.
That was he was when he was in his younger days, he was DJing out at the clubs in New York. He's from New York, and he was an awesome DJ. I'm not sure now, but in the past, every DJ that you went to in Shibuya
knew him.
Well, he was one of his proteges, and he was their mentor. And they would come up to Tama to learn when they were young, and they would learn. And then they'd go down to Shibuya or Roppongi, the clubs, and the old Juliana clubs and all that. They all had somebody was working there that was once his protege there. So it was a fun time. Yeah. And I was about 30 years old, so it was really fun.
Right. Is that where I met? Were you in that job when I came to you? When I met you?
No.
Okay, so tell me. So from there, then you went.
Yeah. So from there, I went from being then I got moved into a different job when I was about 50 years old. Pretty much, they said you're having too much fun out there. Tama Hills is 15 miles from the base, which means it's at least an hour drive. So I was, pretty much on my own, did my own thing, and they pretty much said, you're having too much fun. You need to come back, to what we would call the headquarters, and then they gave me a job of running almost everything there in what we call, at that time was MWR.
Right.
Yeah. So morale, welfare, and recreation. So I ran, so under me was the clubs. Bowling, bowling, pet care, pet care centers, bowling centers, arts and crafts centers, the clubs, Aero Club, flying airplanes.
The systems, yeah.
Yeah, I hated that, but that's fine. I still had to go fly into planes.
Wow.
The bus transportation, lodging, they call it DFAC now, but it's the dining facility, enlisted dining facility for the airmen where they all went to eat.
What about the movie theaters?
Movie theaters, that's Army and Air Force Exchange Service.
That's outside.
Yeah, that's outside. So BXs, things like that are outside. But I ran everything else that was there.
Everything else.
So so we had, I don't know, it was 5 or 6 different, they call them flights. And so they're like different groups within the huge. The squadron had about 1,000 staff. There's 1,000 people working for the group, and of course we have the squadron commander, and then there's like 5 or 6 flights. So I ran one of the flights, it's community services flight. Out of that, I had 42 buildings and about 700 people working for me.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was the largest flight, or bigger than some of the other, It's bigger than civil engineers. So
Right.
had more people than civil engineers. So, yeah, that's what I was doing pretty much before I met you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did you do that? How long were you
About
there?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years, oversaw that.
Right.
Again, during that time, was we had a lot of different things going on. Of course, that affected most was the 311.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my last year there, or second to last year there was 311, and so so I was in charge of all the lodging facilities and the food. So of course, right after, as soon as that happened, we're all meeting to figure this out. We get notified that 9 jumbo jets are flying in because they couldn't land anywhere else. And these are all U.S. carriers, Delta and some of the other ones that, they're all coming in, they're landing, and we have to keep them here. So some of them stayed, they wouldn't let their passengers off the plane, but I think 3 of them did.
Wait, for how long?
They were there probably 10 hours,
Oh, I see.
10, 12 hours,
Yeah, right, okay.
until they flew like Nagoya
Right.
or Osaka.
Where they were going, okay,
Yeah,
right.
until they flew there. But like some of the ones that were for Tokyo, so they had to come off the plane because they couldn't fly into Haneda, they couldn't fly into Narita. So they came off, but they couldn't disembark there because it's not an international airport.
Right.
So they had to stay the night. They actually stayed 2 nights there. And during that time, so you're talking, I think there was 3 jets, 1,500 people. We had to find sleeping space for them.
So they didn't stay on the planes. They did.
Yeah, they can't stay on the plane.
Okay, right,
Yeah, so they had to come back off. We had to fix up some makeshift. We brought
in
in
the hangars or something, or where?
It was actually in the community center,
Okay.
which is a huge community center that we had. So we had to set that up. Then we had to feed them 3 times a day.
For 3 days. Huh?
For 3 days, and that was just the start. Then they all left. Then we said goodbye, and they took off. That's great. They were able to get back to where they were supposed to be going. The airports opened, backed up, and that was great. But then that's when everything started. That's when the radiation.
Everything else, right? Everyone was worried about the fallout, right?
Yeah, I remember. So I forgot what time. I was in my boss office with another flight chief, and we were just chit-chatting there when it happened. And of course, in about 6 hours later, I think we had like 50 Marines land.
Right.
They weren't asked to come.
They just came.
They just came.
Right. Okay.
And they said, where can we set up, and where can we sleep, and where can we sit? So we had to turn in. We had to make some temporary lodging facilities for them. I was on the phone with Korea and Okinawa asking for how many cots do you guys have? Send me all. Pretty much because everybody was coming in. We had several thousand people come in because that was the headquarters for the military. 5th Air Force is there, and then the 3-star was originally. Then they flew in the 4-star from Hawaii, who took over as the commander-in-chief of that Operation Tomodachi. Yeah. So, and then that's when things like evacuations started.
Right.
Yeah.
For all non-essential personnel.
So yeah, so
right.
all the militaries, of course, the Navy was
That's
the first to leave.
That's
The Navy guys came in.
Right.
Yokosuka was gone. At Tsugi, they were leaving. Army, and then we had to send all the families back. And so again, the staging areas was held at the clubs. So we were the staging points. Buses would be coming all day long. We'd have to bring them in there. We have to feed them until they were ready to leave. And so that was like I don't know how many days. It was pretty much no sleep getting through those days because they were coming in at all hours. Right. Morning, early morning, and midnight, whatever. They were just shoveling people through. And then that kind of settled down. Yeah. And then of course. The generals are all talking with the State Department about evacuating Tokyo of Americans.
That's right.
And then and so we're in this big comp meeting space, and I asked, how many are we talking about? And they said, well, probably close to 80,000. I said, you want to evacuate 80,000 people, bring them onto Yokota, in how many days? And they said, a week. Wait, I said, I don't think it works out that way because even if you had, how many people fit on a jumbo jet? If you max them out, 500, whatever, and you're going to bring all these people in, So if you get 5,000 people a day, you know, how many days is it going to take you to evacuate everybody if you get 10 jumbo jets chartered? So they kind of did that. But then pretty much my job was when they come in,
to make sure they're fed.
Make sure they're fed and make sure they have sleeping spaces.
Right.
Yeah, so that was, again.
What about, people didn't think about clothing, like laundry or anything like that?
Well, of course, that all happened. That's all part of it.
That was all part of it?
Yeah, we had to prepare for, you know, so all the, what you call, laundry machines and dryers. Yeah, luckily you were in CE, they have, you know, what they call housing supply.
Right.
A huge warehouse with nothing but washing machines
and dryers, right?
Yeah, we pretty much used all that.
Wow.
Yeah, every sleeping bag, every couch, everything that we can find that we can use was used. However, we never went to that. We never went to the evacuation.
People didn't know what was going to happen.
But we had to be prepared for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had to be prepared. So, but you know, we go through this exercise, you know, every so often throughout the year as a military because it's called non-combatant evacuation.
Right.
And pretty much the idea is if Korea went to war, all the people from Korea would come to Tokyo. Then you would have to house them, feed them, all that kind of stuff before you ship back to the States.
Right.
Well, it was the same thing.
Right,
So only they were coming from local.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
So were you happy to leave that to come to this?
Well, I mean, you know, it was a different thing. Yeah, it was a different choice. You know, I was getting to be as a DoD civilian.
You told me.
It's 5 years is your maximum time. You know, that you can stay. It still is right now. Pretty much, you have to rotate. You know, after 5 years.
At a certain age.
Well, at any age, it's 5 years. Doesn't matter.
Years.
Yeah, 5 years, and everybody has to leave. They kept me here for 25 years.
Right. They're supposed to leave, right?
I was supposed to leave, you know, 20 years before that.
Right.
Yeah, but they kept extending me. So for different projects. So you know, when Tama Hills reopened, so I designed all of Tama Hills. That's a $400 million project that we did with the government of Japan. And Boicho, and then also some of the stuff from the military. So I worked with, that was probably a 4 or 5 year project leading to that. And
you're the one that designed it.
Yeah, well, I was in the original part of it because it was started when I was up at Tama Hills.
I understand, right.
But
you saw it through to the end.
And then, yeah, at the end part, so I came back in '98. It had just started like the year before, and it wasn't going very well.
Okay.
There was all kinds of problems. I came in, I took over, and then, you know, being able to speak Japanese was it was an advantage when you're meeting with nothing, you know, in a meeting room with 50 people, you know, 49 of them are Japanese speakers. You know, you have one, you know, architect that's works for the Corps of Engineers. So I was, you know, came in, was able to communicate, and we opened in time. You know, we got everything opened like in phases. We did it. Huge project. You know, buildings completely revamped, redeveloped. You know, it's not as big as this building here, but you know, the cost of it because of the scope of it was over $400 million at that time.
When you say this building here, for those that are just listening to this, you're talking about the Tokyo American Club.
Tokyo American Club,
right.
Yeah. The Tokyo American Club, of course, you know, cost, and it was a huge project.
300 million.
Yeah, it's a huge project. Right. Yeah. So the scope of it, I mean, this is much bigger when you're looking at all the facilities and the rooms. Over there was a lot of buildings rebuilt. Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky. I was able to rebuild, you know, the outdoor rec building at Yokota. Then I came and rebuilt Tama Hills. And then, you know, I added all the cabins, the log cabins that were there. So we replaced that. I, you know, went to the U.S., got all those orders, brought them in here, had them rebuilt and put them up. Yeah, so been extremely lucky there. Went back to Yokota. You know, was involved in some of the renovations that were there, and also the construction of the Chili's.
Okay.
The fitness center, the pet care center, the new bowling center. Yeah, that was all part of my
master plan.
Yeah. So and I was able to, as the recreation director, the base plan. They put together a 10-year plan, and so I was able to contribute to that. So a lot of the buildings that there now are where I located, like the swimming pools, and the not the fitness center, but was at the community center. So those are kind of the pet care centers where I located it. Some of the child care centers where I was able to map out, along with the base designers.
Right.
And actually that design and package we put together won an Air Force award for it.
Did
So,
it for a good design for a base, right?
Yeah. So they used to give out annual awards. So yeah. So then, 10 years later, 10, 15 years later, you see all that coming together.
Right.
It's like, hey, I know that one. I put that one there. Oh, I should have gone there. Something like that, that's not a great area. I would put it over here, but those are some fun times.
Right.
So that gave me a lot of experience on, So when I came here, it kind of fell in really easy. I already know, working with engineering, I knew a lot of that because of all the buildings I've had to design and work with. So they come talk to me, in their language, and I can understand it. So, F&B, of course, that's something that I've always done. And then recreation, I had 10 years in recreation. So it felt pretty comfortable coming in here. And of course, with you here, it was even more comfortable. We were
very lucky to get you. That's for sure. I felt very, very good about that.
It was an opportunity. But for some reason, just going to school, St. Mary's used to be in Mita, which was probably about a 20-minute walk from here, and then when you're a kid, it only takes you 10 minutes to run here.
That's right. Yeah. So you came here all the time?
All the time. All the time. Yeah, even when my dad wasn't a member.
Even when he wasn't a member, you came?
Yeah. Right. So he became a member as a company member in 71, something like that.
Well, that's before the club we just tore down was put up, because that was put up in 74.
Yeah, so
you knew the old club.
I knew the old club.
That was the original club that we put up in 54.
Yeah, so and then in 1974 is when
they put the new club
his company membership ran out, and pretty much so I hadn't, then of course been here with the new club here and there, attending weddings, party things, coming over here. Actually came here, when was that? In the 90s, early 90s, to run all the 4th of July. I think for 2 years straight. Okay. We had all the bouncies and the barbecue stuff.
Right. We used to put out out in the parking area. We sure did.
Yeah. So
that's neat.
Yeah. We at that time, of course, Mike, my predecessor, Mike Baumgardner.
Oh yes.
He's also ex-military.
Ex-Army, yes.
Yeah. And then he was also part of our group. I've known Mike since the day he arrived in Japan. Okay. Yeah, because he's it's the club manager tight knit.
You guys are very, very tight.
Yeah, so we knew he was here, and he was of course the assistant at that time. But we knew he was here, and we've been back and forth. We all gone to the same schools. We've all gone to the same seminars and festivals or whatever they have, and we've all attended at there and stayed in the same hotel, so we all knew each other. Mike's a little older, so I didn't know exactly. He's a little older than I was, so yeah, he's. No, I met him the day, I think, and his son, I think, was a St. Mary's grad too. So
I think so, yes. Wow. So what is this? We're going to wrap this up a little bit, but I want to ask you a question that I've been thrown at me a lot. What is the St. Mary's Mafia?
What mafia?
What is the St. Mary's Mafia?
There's no such
that so much. Is that because you guys are so tightly knit?
St. Mary's is very tightly knit, but there's no such thing as a mafia. Okay. Remember, I'm Italian.
There's no mafia. There's no mafia.
There's no such thing as a mafia.
What you talk about?
No, St. Mary's is very tight.
Very tight.
The Alumni Association is fantastic. We've had some very great chairman, presidents of the association that's promoted. You know how I got your name? How's that?
As one of the people running for a general manager of this club. When I was president of the club, one of your classmates by the name of Bill Ireton, who used to be over Warner Brothers. Senpai, he's your senior. Yeah. He came to me and said, Lance, he said, look, I got an offer here, you can't refuse. And he handed me your name. He said, make sure it gets done. I said, let me look at it, Bill. No, but he was really nice. He said, this is someone, his comment basically was this. He said, look, he's a St. Mary grad. I've known him for a long time. He's running everything out there at Yokota. And there's something that the American Club needs that's never had, and that's someone who's bilingual. And I couldn't have agreed with him more. He said, we need someone who can work on both sides of the fence. And you gave me your name, and that's one reason why I was really, really keen on having you here.
That's great. That's great.
You were just, and it worked out beautifully.
Yeah.
What are your plans for the future?
Well, I mean, we'll see how long I can stay here, and then it's coming on my 10th year.
Okay.
So it is a long time to be here, for 10 years for one manager. So eventually I plan on moving on. Like I said, my daughter's 34, so it's not like I have to, go back
Pay
to
her
work.
tuition or anything.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So I don't know, maybe take it easy. But I have a 92-year-old mother that lives with me.
Okay.
Yeah, she has dementia, so she needs a little more care. So I need, if I do go back to work, it will probably be something like, something that I can kind of work with by taking care of her, and then also, doing, because I can't stay still.
Right. That's obvious.
Even if I have to go cut grass in the morning at the golf course, that'd be perfect for me.
Now, your wife's Japanese, right?
That's correct.
And you've only been married once?
Twice.
Twice?
Yes.
Was the first time you married an Italian woman?
Nope, Japanese.
Japanese.
But she had an Italian temper. I can tell you that much.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was married young.
Okay.
I got married when I was 25.
Right. Is that who your child's by, or is it by your?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I was married when I was 25 and got divorced when I was 28, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, 30, maybe something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and then didn't get married until I was 50.
Right. Wow.
So I was single
You
for.
waited. You said, "Hey,
Yeah.
let's just ride this out and see what happens."
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah, I didn't. I said I can't get married until my daughter graduates.
Wow.
Yeah, from college. So and that was pretty much at 50 years old. So now I'm pretty free.
I'm feeling good.
Yeah. So it was yeah. I mean it was a good 50 years. I was able to also not being married and single. My daughter was living with her mom.
Okay. Here in Japan.
In Japan, I was able to concentrate a lot on work. And that's how I, finished going to school and college, and then going to college again because I had to do a master's program with the military.
Right.
Because they make you do it.
Right.
Because if you don't do this,
you're not gonna
move up.
You can't advance.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And then at the very end, and they said, well, when I became the flight chief, they said, well, you have to have the same education as every other military member in your position has, which is about a major or lieutenant colonel at that time. And so they all went to this thing called Air War College. I had no intention of learning about wars, but
you need to know if you're going to be on a base. That's
if
right.
you're going to be on a base, you
That's
have to
right.
have the same knowledge and education as somebody who's next to you,
right.
because you're always working with them. They're sitting next to you. You're working with them. They're in the office next to you, and so it's only fair. So we went to. I ended up doing both, and it's okay. I mean, it's what it was at that time. It never helps. It never hurts to always learn new stuff.
That's for sure.
So,
Tony, you have any parting words before I close out?
No, nothing. I just think maybe you were talking about the Italian or the St. Mary's Mafia.
Right here.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. That's it.
This is it.
St. Mary Mafia.
So if you're wearing this,
they know.
they know.
That's like the special handshake.
Exactly.
Or the blink of the eye. Or
Yeah, my ring.
ring. Tony, thank you so much.
No,
for
thank
taking
you.
the
No, thank
time to
you.
do this. I know you're a busy man.
No.
There's so much to do. Thank you.
No,
so
thank you.
much,
It's
sir.
great. It's great. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All of you watching this podcast, remember to press like, subscribe, and remember, it's all on loan. Continue to reach for the stars, and you're too blessed to be stressed.